Hey guys, tonight we are stripping away the white marble fantasy of antiquity and dropping you straight into the gritty, dusty reality of the classical world. We're going to wake up in a city that smells less like ambrosia and more like unwashed bodies and donkey manure, navigating a day where simply getting a drink of water is a gamble with your intestinal health. You probably won't survive this, or at least, your modern sensibilities definitely won't make it past breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off with us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, but for a moment, you aren't entirely sure you're awake. It is pitch black, not the ambient, streetlight filtered darkness of a modern suburb, but a heavy, suffocating gloom that presses against your eyelids. The air is stagnant, thick with the smell of old dust, dried clay, and something vaguely sour, like wine that turned to vinegar 3 days ago. You try to take a deep breath to clear your head, but the air is hot, already stiflingly hot, even though you suspect the sun hasn't been up for long. You attempt to roll over, expecting the yielding softness of memory foam or inner springs, but your hip bone grinds against something unforgiving. You are lying on a cline, a piece of furniture that functions as a couch by day and a bed by night. It's essentially a wooden frame with strips of leather or cord interlaced across it, topped with a mattress stuffed with dried reeds or wool that has long since lost its fluff. It's lumpy, it smells faintly of animal grease, and it's significantly shorter than you are used to. Your feet are dangling off the end, defenseless against whatever might be crawling on the floor. You sit up, groggy and disoriented, rubbing the grit from your eyes. As your vision adjusts to the gloom, you realize why it's so dark. There are no windows. You are in a small, cramped room on the ground floor of an Athenian house, and in this era, windows on the street level are a security risk. Burglars, known as toi chori choi or wall diggers, are a very real problem here. They don't pick locks. They literally dig through the walls of houses because the walls are made of unbaked mud brick. If you had a window, you'd just be making their job easier. So you sleep in a clay box, safe from thieves, but sealed in with your own exhaled carbon dioxide. You swing your legs over the side of the cline, and your bare feet hit the floor. It's not cool tile or warm wood. It is hard-packed earth, just dirt. If you're lucky, maybe there are some small stones or pebbles embedded in it to create a rough mosaic, but mostly it's just the ground. You freeze, your toes curling instinctively. You remember hearing that in these climates, scorpions and centipedes love the cool, damp corners of mud brick houses. You hold your breath, listening. The silence of the room is broken only by the faint, ratching sound of something inside the wall. It's probably just a mouse, or perhaps a gecko, but in the dark, every noise sounds like a venomous threat. Carefully, you shuffle forward, arms outstretched like a zombie, trying to find the door. Your hand brushes against the wall, and a flake of plaster comes away, dusting your arm with white powder. These houses are constantly shedding. It's a maintenance nightmare. You realize that the golden age of Greece looks a lot more like a shanty town from the inside. While the temples up on the Acropolis are made of gleaming Pentelic marble, your house and the houses of Socrates, Plato, and everyone else you've heard of is essentially a glorified mud hut. It's biodegradable architecture. If the roof leaks, the walls melt. You stub your toe on something hard and ceramic. A sharp pain shoots up your foot, and you stifle a curse. You've just kicked the anus, or chamber pot. Since there is no bathroom down the hall, and certainly no toilet, this clay jar is your best friend until you can leave the house. You really hope you didn't tip it over. The smell suggests it was used during the night. You gingerly step around it, making a mental note that you are definitely not in a hygienic paradise. Finally, your fingers find the wooden latch of the door. You lift it and push. The door creaks open on heavy pivot hinges. Metal hinges haven't really caught on for domestic use yet, and you are blinded by a sudden assault of white light. You step out into the courtyard, the central lung of the house. This is where the magic happens, or at least where the air is breathable. The Greek house, the oikos, is entirely introverted. It turns its back on the street and looks inward to this open patch of sky. The sun is already blazing, casting sharp, geometrical shadows across the beaten earth of the courtyard. Dust motes dance in the shafts of light. In the center, there's an altar to Zeus Herkaios, the protector of the household enclosure. It's covered in dried garlands and looks a bit neglected. You figure you should probably pay your respects later, just in case. You look around, blinking. To your left, under a shaded colonnade, you see a loom with a half-finished piece of wool cloth. This suggests that the women of the house are already awake and working, or perhaps they are upstairs. Historians still argue whether the concept of the gynoeceum, the women's quarters, meant that women were strictly segregated to the upper floor and locked away, or if the division of space was more fluid and based on who was home at the time. Either way, the house feels divided. There are spaces for men, spaces for women, and very little crossover. It feels less like a family home and more like two separate boarding houses sharing a kitchen. You feel a rumble in your stomach. You're thirsty. You spot a large terracotta jar, a pithos, standing in the corner of the colonnade. You stumble over to it, hoping for ice water, but of course there is no ice. You dip a ladle into the water. It's lukewarm. It was hauled from a public fountain yesterday by a slave or a family member, and it's been sitting here ever since. You take a sip. It tastes flat and slightly earthy, with a hint of ceramic glaze. It's not refreshing, but it wets your throat. As you lean against the wooden pillar, enjoying the shade, you look up at the roof. It's covered in terracotta tiles, layered to shed the rain. You notice a few are cracked. It's a reminder that this environment is fragile. One good earthquake or a heavy storm, and this whole mud and wood contraption could come down on your head. And yet, this is where the great ideas of Western civilization are being born, not in the marble halls, but here, in these dusty, fly-ridden courtyards, amidst the smell of stale water and the scratching of chickens pecking at the dirt floor. You wipe the sweat from your forehead. You've been awake for maybe 10 minutes, and you're already hot, thirsty, and covered in a fine layer of dust. The romantic image of the toga-clad philosopher creates a very different expectation than this gritty reality. And speaking of clothing, you realize you are standing in the middle of the courtyard in your underwear, which is to say, you're naked, because the ancient Greeks didn't really do underwear in the modern sense. You need to get dressed before anyone sees you, but that presents a whole new set of challenges involving yards of heavy wool and zero zippers. You retreat back into the gloom of your bedroom to face the day, navigating past the scorpion zone and the chamber pot, fully aware that the simple act of waking up was the easiest part of what is about to be a very long, very tiring day. Having successfully navigated the dark, scorpion-infested obstacle course of your bedroom, you realize that nature is calling with an urgency that cannot be ignored. The ceramic chamber pot in the corner, the amas we awkwardly sidestepped earlier, is technically an option. But in the harsh light of morning, with the stagnant air of the room pressing in, the idea of using a clay jar that won't be emptied until who knows when feels like a violation of your modern dignity. Plus, it's already half full. You decide to brave the world outside and seek out a public facility, clinging to the naive hope that the ancient Greeks, the inventors of geometry and democracy, surely applied some of that brilliance to sanitation. You step out of the house, blinking in the glare, and make your way down the winding, narrow street. You are looking for a kopron, a public latrine. When you finally find one, tucked away near the busy marketplace, your heart sinks. If you were expecting the privacy of a stall, a locking door, or even a modest partition, you are in for a severe culture shock. The Greek public latrine is the definition of an open concept floor plan. It is essentially a rectangular room lined with stone benches along the walls. Cut into these benches at regular intervals are keyhole-shaped openings. That's it. There are no dividers. There are no privacy screens. There is just a row of men, tunics hitched up, sitting side by side like birds on a wire, conducting their business in full view of one another. You hesitate in the doorway, paralyzed by a lifetime of conditioning that says the bathroom is a solitary fortress of solitude. Here, it is a social club. You reluctantly take a seat on the cold stone, trying to make yourself as small as possible. The man next to you, a burly fellow with flour on his hands, nods a greeting and immediately launches into a complaint about the rising cost of barley. You stare straight ahead, your face burning, trying to dissociate from the reality that your knees are practically touching his. This is the norm here. The latrine is an extension of the agora, a place to gossip, cut deals, and debate politics. The concept of bathroom privacy simply doesn't exist. In fact, historians still argue whether the layout of these latrines, often arranged in a U-shape or a circle, was intentionally designed to maximize conversation, or if it was just the most efficient way to route the plumbing. Either way, you are now part of the discussion. But the social anxiety is nothing compared to the logistical nightmare that awaits you at the end of the transaction. You look around for the toilet paper. You look for a dispenser, a roll, a stack of leaves, anything. There is nothing. You start to panic. Your eyes dart around the room and land on two primary options, neither of which you want to accept as reality. Option 1 is a pile of smooth, rounded stones or ceramic shards known as pessoi. You've seen these scattered around archaeological sites and assumed they were game pieces or counting tokens. Nope, they are wiping tools. The Greeks have a proverb, 3 stones are enough to wipe. You look at the pile of dusty, hard ceramic fragments, essentially broken pottery that has been sanded down at the edges if you're lucky, and you feel a phantom pain just thinking about it. The abrasion alone is enough to make you wince. Using a shard of a broken vase to clean your most delicate area is a level of toughness you simply do not possess. Option 2 is arguably worse. Resting in a shallow channel of running water at your feet, or sometimes in a bucket of vinegar water, is a stick with a sea sponge tied to the end. This is the xylospongium. It looks innocuous enough, like a gentle, natural loofah. But then you watch the man across from you finish his business. He reaches down, grabs the stick, uses it, rinses it briefly in the channel of water, and puts it back. He puts it back. The realization hits you like a physical blow. The sponge is communal. You are expected to use the same cleaning tool that every other person in this room has used today, yesterday, and last week. There is no sterilization process. There is no bleach. There is only a cursory swish in water that is likely already contaminated. The germ theory of disease is thousands of years away, but your modern brain is screaming at you about E. coli, cholera, and things you don't even know the names of. You stare at the sponge. It looks ragged, gray, and tired. It has seen things. You look at the pile of stones. They look hard and unforgiving. You are caught in the ultimate Sophie's choice of hygiene. If you choose the stones, you risk laceration and hemorrhoids, a condition so common in the ancient world that there is an entire subset of medical texts dedicated to treating it. If you choose the sponge, you are essentially shaking hands with the intestinal flora of every stranger in Athens. You opt for the stones, deciding that physical pain is preferable to biological warfare. It is an experience you will never, ever forget, and one you will never speak of again. Finished and traumatized, you stand up and rearrange your tunic. Now you need to wash your hands. You look for a sink. There isn't one. There is usually a fountain or a basin nearby, but there is absolutely no soap. Soap, made from rendered animal fat and ash, is known to the Gauls and some other barbarian tribes, but the Greeks aren't big fans. They prefer oil, but you don't have your oil flask with you right now. So, you rinse your hands in the cold water of the fountain, rubbing them together vigorously, knowing deep down that you aren't really cleaning anything. You are just wetting the bacteria. You walk out of the latrine feeling significantly less clean than when you went in. You feel gritty. You feel exposed. And you have a newfound appreciation for the plush, 2-ply toilet paper you took for granted back in the 21st century. As you walk away, trying to keep your hands from touching anything, you notice people greeting each other with open handshakes and warm embraces. You shudder. The casual exchange of germs here is astronomical. It's a miracle anyone survives past 30. You realize that in this world, cleanliness is a visual concept, not a microbiological one. If you look clean and smell like oil, you are clean. The invisible world of microbes is having a field day on your skin, but as long as you don't talk about it, maybe it won't hurt you. You rub your hands on your wool tunic, trying to dry them, but the wool is rough and scratchy. It doesn't absorb water like cotton, it just sort of smears it around. You are beginning to understand that comfort is a very modern invention. Here, everything is textured, everything is hard, and everything is shared. You take a deep breath of the morning air, which carries the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat, and try to push the memory of the communal sponge to the back of your mind. You have a long day ahead, and you can't spend it worrying about bacteria. You have to worry about breakfast, and more importantly, how you're going to survive wearing this outfit. Standing in the street outside the latrine, you feel a distinct draft. The morning air is picking up, and you become acutely aware that your current attire is complicated. You need to get properly dressed before you draw even more attention to yourself. In the modern world, getting dressed is a mindless routine. Underwear, socks, pants, shirt, zip, button, done. In ancient Greece, getting dressed is an origami project where the paper is a giant, heavy rectangle of wool, and the consequences of failure are public exposure. You head back to the courtyard of your temporary home to tackle the chiton. This is the standard garment for men, a simple tunic that seemed deceptively easy to wear. It's essentially two rectangular pieces of fabric sewn up the sides with holes left for the arms and head, or sometimes just one big rectangle draped and pinned. You pick it up. It's made of wool, not the soft, chemically treated merino wool you might buy at an outdoor store today. This is raw, homespun wool. It still has a bit of lanolin grease in it. It smells like a sheep that's been out in the rain, and it is incredibly scratchy. You pull it over your head. Immediately, you feel the weight of it. It hangs off your shoulders like a heavy blanket. The hem hits you just above the knees. If it were longer, dragging near your ankles, you'd be signaling that you're either an elderly man, a priest, or perhaps a woman. If it were much shorter, you'd look like a laborer or a slave. The knee-length cut is the Goldilocks zone for a respectable citizen, but getting it to sit right is an art form. Now comes the hardware. There are no buttons. Buttons are a futuristic fantasy. Instead, you have fibulae. These are essentially heavy-duty safety pins, often made of bronze or iron, sometimes decorated with intricate designs if you're fancy. You have to pin the fabric at the shoulders to keep the whole thing from sliding off. You grab the bronze pin, which is thicker than a nail, and try to drive it through the dense layers of wool. It takes significant force. You slip, and the pin stabs your thumb. A bead of blood wells up. You curse, sucking on your thumb, realizing that getting dressed here carries a genuine risk of tetanus. You try again, managing to secure the left shoulder. The fabric bunches up, thick and unyielding, of the right. You pin it, but you realize you've pinned it too tight. The neckline is choking you. You undo it and try again. Now it's too loose, gaping open to reveal your chest in a way that feels less heroic and more wardrobe malfunction. You fiddle with it for 5 minutes, sweating. The wool does not breathe. It traps your body heat instantly. You are wearing a portable sauna. Once the tunic is somewhat secure, you need a belt or zone. This isn't leather with a buckle. It's a strip of cloth or a cord. You tie it around your waist, and then, this is the crucial styling tip, you have to pull the excess fabric up over the belt to create a pouch of material called the colpos. This overhanging fold is vital. It hides the belt, adjusts the length of the hem, and serves as a pocket. Since the chiton has no sewn-in pockets, the kolpos is where you store your stuff. A few coins, maybe a small snack, or a scraped piece of pottery if you're a weird hoarder. You stuff a few obols, small coins, into the fold, hoping they don't fall out when you walk. But you're not done. If you're going out into the city, you need a cloak, the himation. This is another, even larger rectangle of heavy wool. There are no pins for this one. It is held in place purely by friction, gravity, and your own posture. The standard way to wear it is to drape one end over your left shoulder, pull the rest across your back, under your right arm, and then throw the remaining end back over your left shoulder. You attempt this maneuver. You toss the fabric over your shoulder with a flourish, trying to look like a statue of Pericles. The heavy wool smacks you in the face. You try again. You wrap it around, but as soon as you move your arm, the whole thing starts to slide. You realize that keeping a himation in place requires you to keep your left arm relatively immobile, effectively clamping the fabric down. This explains why so many statues have that stiff, one-armed pose. It's not an artistic choice, it's a practical necessity to keep their clothes from falling off. You finally get the cloak to stay put, but you feel restricted. Your right arm is free, but your left is trapped in a woolen sling. You take a few steps. The wool rubs against the back of your neck. It scratches your thighs. You are itching everywhere. You start to understand why the Greeks were so obsessed with olive oil. Slathering yourself in oil creates a barrier between your skin and this aggressive fabric. Without it, you are just being slowly exfoliated by your own outfit. And let's talk about the temperature. It is a warm Mediterranean day. You are wearing 2 layers of dense wool. You are already sweating profusely. The sweat soaks into the wool, which becomes heavy and damp. It doesn't dry quickly. You are going to spend the entire day encased in a hot, damp, sheep-smelling cocoon. Historians debate how often these garments were washed, since washing involved stomping on them in a tub of stale urine. The ammonia acts as a bleach, and Fuller's Earth, it wasn't exactly a daily chore. Most people just aired them out. So, you are also smelling the ghostly remnants of the last 10 times you wore this. You look down at your feet. Sandals. Simple leather soles with straps. You slide your feet in and tie the leather thongs around your ankles. The leather is stiff and cuts into your heel. Blisters are inevitable, but at least your toes can breathe. You take a tentative step. The sandals offer 0 arch support. You can feel every pebble on the ground. It's better than being barefoot, but not by much. You catch a reflection of yourself in a polished bronze mirror hanging near the door. You look lumpy. The elegance of Greek drapery that you see in museums is the result of hours of careful arrangement and probably hidden pins. In reality, you look like you're wrapped in a rug. You feel bulky, hot, and itchy. You constantly have to hitch up your shoulder or adjust your cloak. You realize that poise in the ancient world wasn't just about manners. It was a constant physical battle to keep your clothes from unraveling. You head for the door again, ready to face the agora. You are hot, you are slightly bleeding from a pinprick, and you are terrified that a strong gust of wind will leave you exposed. But you are dressed, you are a citizen, and you are ready to enter the chaotic, smelly heart of the city, armed only with your wits and a pouch full of loose change that is slowly migrating down your leg. Clad in your heavy, scratchy wool armor and clutching your precarious pouch of coins, you step out of the courtyard and into the Athenian street. If you thought the air inside your bedroom was stifling, the street offers a sensory experience that hits you like a physical wall. You are immediately assaulted by the true fragrance of the ancient world. It is a complex bouquet of wood smoke, roasting garlic, unwashed humanity, rancid fat, and the unmistakable eye-watering tang of raw sewage. There is no municipal plumbing system here, at least not for the average home. The streets are essentially open drains. A narrow channel runs down the middle of the road, carrying a sluggish stream of wastewater, kitchen slops, and the contents of countless chamber pots. You watch your step with the intensity of a bomb disposal technician. One wrong move, one slip on a slick cobblestone, or a patch of mud, and you will be wearing the city's refuse on your hem for the rest of the day. And remember, you can't just throw that tunic in the washing machine. You navigate the maze-like alleyways. Athens grew organically, without the rigid grid planning you might see in later Roman cities or modern suburbs. The streets are narrow, winding, and confusing. Balconies from the upper stories overhang the path, sometimes nearly touching across the middle, blocking out the sun and trapping the smells below. You flatten yourself against a rough plaster wall to let a donkey pass. The beast is laden with panniers of charcoal, and its owner shouts at you to move, whacking the animal with a stick. The donkey brushes past, its coarse hair scraping your arm, leaving a smudge of charcoal dust on your white wool. You are 5 minutes into your commute, and your outfit is already compromised. As you get closer to the city center, the hum of the city grows into a roar. You are approaching the agora. In your history books, the agora is described as a stately place of democracy and philosophy, where bearded men in pristine robes discuss the nature of virtue. In reality, it is a chaotic, deafening cross between a stock exchange floor, a flea market, and a barnyard. You pass the horoi, the boundary stones that mark the entrance to the sacred commercial space. Once you cross this invisible line, the rules change. You are in the belly of the beast. The noise is overwhelming. Criers are shouting the daily news and advertising lost goods. Fishmongers are screaming about the freshness of their catch. Money changers are clinking coins on tables. It is a cacophony of commerce. You try to weave through the crowd, but personal space is a foreign concept here. People are packed shoulder to shoulder. You are jostled, bumped, and elbowed. You feel the heat radiating off hundreds of bodies, mixing with the sun beating down on the dust. Your wool tunic feels heavier by the second. The market is divided into circles or zones, named after what they sell. You hear someone shout, "I'm going to the olive oil," or "I'll meet you at the perfume." It's a shorthand geography. You wander into the food section, hoping to find breakfast. The sight is both impressive and appalling. There are piles of figs buzzing with wasps. There are baskets of eels writhing in damp straw. There are slabs of meat hanging from hooks, exposed to the open air, the flies and the dust kicked up by passing sandals. You spot the fish market, which is easily the most volatile sector of the agora. The Athenians are obsessed with fresh fish. It is a status symbol. A bell rings, a signal that a fresh catch has arrived, and suddenly the crowd surges. You are nearly trampled. It's like a Black Friday stampede, but for sardines. You watch as grown men, respectable citizens, elbow each other out of the way to bid on a sea bream. It is an intense, high-stakes environment where a split-second hesitation means you're eating salted anchovies for dinner again. While you are trying to avoid being crushed by a fish-crazed mob, you notice the agoranomoi patrolling the area. These are the market inspectors, officials charged with maintaining order and fairness. They are checking weights and measures, ensuring that the wine jars are the standard size and that the loaves of bread aren't full of sawdust. It's a mainstream historical fact that consumer protection existed back then, but seeing it in action is fascinating. You watch an inspector smash a merchant's clay weight on the ground because it was hollowed out to cheat customers. The merchant screams, the crowd cheers, and for a moment you witness the rough justice of the marketplace. But amidst the commerce, there is danger. You instinctively clutch your kolpos, the fold of your tunic where your money is hidden. Pickpockets, or balantiotomoi, literally purse cutters, are everywhere. They work in teams. One creates a distraction, maybe dropping a crate of apples or starting a fake fight, while the other slices the cord of your purse or dips a hand into your tunic folds. You find yourself walking with a defensive hunch, eyeing everyone suspiciously. The relaxed stroll you envisioned is actually a high-stress tactical maneuver. As you push through the crowd, you step into something soft. You freeze. You look down. It's not mud. It's a pile of donkey manure. Of course it is. Livestock are everywhere here. Farmers bring their goats and sheep right into the market to sell milk or cheese, or the animals themselves. You scrape your sandal against a stone, trying to clean it off, but the smell is now following you. You realize that the earthy scent of the ancient world is 90% animal waste. You try to distract yourself by looking at the stalls. You see a sausage seller, a figure often mocked in Greek comedy as the lowest of the low, a scoundrel who sells questionable meat and uses the grease to slick back his hair. He yells at you to buy a blood pudding. You politely decline, trying not to breathe through your nose. Historians still argue vigorously about who exactly was doing the shopping in these crowds. Was it the male citizens keeping their wives secluded at home? Or were there female slaves and poorer women navigating this chaos? Looking around, you see mostly men, citizens, medics, foreign residents, and slaves. But you do spot a few women selling ribbons and herbs in the corner, heavily veiled and keeping their heads down. The gender dynamics of the space are palpable. It is a male-dominated arena of shouting and posturing, and you feel the aggressive energy in the air. You finally manage to buy a small loaf of barley bread and some olives, haggling awkwardly with a vendor who clearly overcharged you because of your strange accent. There are no price tags. Everything is a negotiation, and you are terrible at it. You walk away feeling fleeced, clutching your meager breakfast. Your head is pounding from the noise, the heat, and the smells. You need to get out of the crush. You spot a portico, a shaded walkway with columns, and head for it like a castaway spotting land. You've survived the morning rush hour, but you are sweaty, your sandal is soiled, and you've likely been ripped off. As you lean against a marble column to catch your breath, you realize that the agora isn't just a market, it's a crucible. It grinds you down. And it's not even noon yet. You take a bite of your dry barley bread, trying to ignore the grit of stone ground flour crunching between your teeth, and prepare for the next hurdle, the back-breaking reality of how this city actually runs. Leaving the chaotic clamor of the agora behind, you follow the sound of a different kind of rhythm, a heavy, repetitive thudding accompanied by the groaning of stressed timber. You turn a corner and are confronted with the literal building blocks of the city. If the agora is the brain of Athens, this construction site is its muscle, and watching it in action makes your lower back ache in sympathy. You are looking at a temple in progress, perhaps even the great works on the Acropolis if we are in the Periclean age, and the sheer scale of the manual labor required is enough to make you want to lie down on the dirty street and take a nap. There are no bulldozers here. There are no forklifts beeping in reverse. There are no hydraulic cranes. Everything you see, massive drums of pentelic marble, limestone blocks weighing tons, giant cedar beams, is being moved by physics, geometry, and an alarming amount of human sweat. You watch a team of workers maneuvering a block of white marble. It is blindingly bright in the sun. They are using a device that looks terrifyingly fragile, the Geronos, or crane. This is a mainstream historical fact that often gets overlooked. The ancient Greeks are credited with inventing the crane, specifically to handle these stone blocks that were too heavy for simple ramps. You stare up at the wooden A-frame structure, held in place by tension ropes. A system of compound pulleys, a technological marvel of the time, is multiplying the force of the men hauling on the ropes. It's ingenious, but it's also terrifying. The ropes are made of hemp or other natural fibers. They creak ominously. If one snaps, the block comes down, and the concept of workers' compensation is about 2,500 years away. You notice something odd about the marble blocks waiting to be lifted. They have strange, nub-like protrusions sticking out of their smooth sides. These are lifting bosses. The masons leave them on the stone intentionally, so the ropes have something to grip. Once the block is set in place, they will chisel these nubs off to create that seamless, perfect finish you see in museums. It's a pragmatic, rough and ready solution that ruins the illusion of effortless perfection. You realize that the Parthenon wasn't just built, it was wrestled into existence, inch by painful inch. As you watch the workers, you notice they are covered in a thick paste of dust and sweat. They are breathing in marble dust with every inhale. There are no respirators. Silicosis is just an occupational hazard that hasn't been named yet. The heat radiating off the white stone is intense. You wipe your own brow, feeling exhausted just by proximity. But here is where the social reality kicks you in the teeth. You might think these skilled stonemasons and architects are the rock stars of the city. They are building monuments that will last for millennia, after all. But the cultural attitude toward them is surprisingly complicated. This brings us to a quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit about the Greek mindset, the concept of banosia. This is the disdain for manual labor, specifically work that involves using fire or sitting indoors bent over a workbench. The aristocratic view, held by guys like Plato and Aristotle, is that physical labor warps the body and by extension warps the mind. If you are too tired from hammering bronze or hauling stone, you don't have the mental energy to be a virtuous citizen or a philosopher. So, while the city glorifies the temple, it kind of looks down on the guy chiseling the frieze. You look at a worker wiping grime from his face and realize that despite his skill, he's considered socially deformed by the elite simply because he has a job. And it gets worse. While these construction workers at least get to see the sky, you recall the source of the silver coins jingling in your tunic. They come from the mines of Lorien, about 30 miles south of Athens. You shudder at the thought. If you think the construction site is dangerous, the mines are a descent into hell. Thousands of slaves, mostly prisoners of war, work in shafts as deep as 300 feet, crawling through galleries barely 2 feet high. They dig for the silver ore that pays for the fleet and the temples. They work in flickering lamplight, breathing toxic dust, sometimes living underground for days or weeks. Historians still argue vigorously about the exact demographics of the workforce, specifically to what extent free citizens worked alongside slaves in these brutal trades. Some evidence suggests that poor citizens did take on bonosic jobs out of necessity, working shoulder to shoulder with unfree labor. But in the mines, it was almost exclusively slaves. It is the dark, unseen underbelly of the glory that was Greece. Every beautiful coin, every gleaming statue, floats on a sea of human misery that the society politely ignores. You turn away from the construction site, feeling a heavy sense of guilt. You decide to look for something more pastoral, maybe a farm. Surely the life of a farmer is peaceful. But as you look out toward the hills surrounding the city, you realize that farming here is not a relaxing hobby. The soil is rocky and thin. The plow is a simple wooden scratch plow, maybe tipped with iron if you're rich. It doesn't turn the soil over like a modern plow. It just gouges a furrow. You have to cross-plow the field twice to make it work. You imagine yourself behind an ox, pushing that plow through dry, rocky earth under the baking sun. There are no tractors. There are no combine harvesters. The harvest is done with a hand sickle, bending over for 12 hours a day, cutting stalks one handful at a time. The threshing, separating the grain from the chaff, is done by having oxen stomp on it or by beating it with sticks. It is an endless cycle of back-breaking exertion. and there is no weekend. The concept of Saturday and Sunday off is non existent. There are festivals, sure, lots of them, actually, which act as public holidays. But the cows still need milking, the crops still need watering, and the work never truly stops. If you are a casual laborer, a theet, you live hand to mouth. If you don't work today, you don't eat tonight. There is no safety net, no unemployment benefits, no HR department to complain to about the lack of shade or the foreman's attitude. You watch a man carrying a heavy amphora of wine on his shoulder. He stumbles slightly, and you wince, expecting a lawsuit. But he just rights himself, grunts, and keeps walking. The resilience of these people is terrifying. Their bodies are hardened by a life of constant physical engagement with the world. You, with your soft office chair body and your need for ergonomic lumbar support, wouldn't last an hour on that construction crew. You'd throw out a disc just trying to lift the water bucket. The sun is climbing higher now, approaching its zenith. The noise of the chisels against stone, tink, 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 is hypnotic, almost rhythmic. It's a sound that has been ringing out across this valley for centuries. It's the heartbeat of the city, a reminder that civilization is heavy, hard, and dusty. You decide you've seen enough of the dignity of labor. You are thirsty, hot, and you have a new appreciation for the fact that you can buy a bag of flour at the supermarket without having to grow, harvest, thresh, and mill the wheat yourself. You shuffle away from the noise, seeking a quieter street, rubbing your shoulder, which aches simply from the power of suggestion. You survived the market, and you've witnessed the crushing reality of work. But now you face a more personal challenge. You are feeling a bit lightheaded, and you remember that bit about balancing humors. You should probably find a doctor, or at least try to figure out why you feel so weird, before you collapse in the street and get mistaken for a drunkard. The combination of the relentless midday sun, the claustrophobic crush of the market, and the fact that you are essentially wearing a sheep-flavored carpet has finally caught up with you. You are feeling distinctly unwell. Your head is swimming. Your vision is a little blurry at the edges, and you have stopped sweating, which your modern brain recognizes as a sign of heat stroke, but which your current environment likely interprets as a moral failing or a divine curse. You lean heavily against a sun-warmed wall, trying to catch your breath, but the air is thick with dust. A passerby, perhaps noticing that you look like you're about to faint, gestures vaguely down the street toward a shop with a large terracotta jar outside. "Iatrion," he mutters, before hurrying off to avoid any potential miasma you might be shedding. You stumble in that direction, hoping for a glass of water and maybe a cold compress. What you are about to walk into is the office of a physician, and it is a place where the cure is frequently more terrifying than the disease. You step into the Iatrion. It doesn't look like a clinic. It looks like a workshop, because that's exactly what it is. In ancient Greece, medicine is a trade, just like pottery or shoemaking. There are no medical licenses, no board certifications, and no diplomas on the wall. Anyone can claim to be a doctor if they can convince people they know what they're doing. The room smells intensely of vinegar, burning herbs, maybe sage or thyme, and something metallic that reminds you of a butcher shop. The physician looks up from a workbench where he is grinding a greenish paste in a mortar. He is wearing a clean tunic, which is a good sign, but his hands are stained with substances. He eyes you critically. In this era, there are no blood tests, no x-rays, no thermometers. The diagnostic tool is the doctor's five senses. He looks at your complexion. He touches your skin to check the temperature. He might even smell your breath. And, in a practice that makes you want to bolt for the door, some physicians are known to taste a patient's earwax or urine to check for sweetness or acidity. You pray this guy is just a visual learner. He starts asking questions, but he's not asking about viruses or bacteria. He's talking about your humors. This is the mainstream historical fact that governs your entire existence right now. According to the prevailing medical theory, your body is a bag containing four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These correspond to the four elements: air, water, fire, earth, and the four seasons. Health is a state of balance or crisis between them. Sickness is just an imbalance. The doctor tisks and shakes his head. You are plethoric, he says. This means you have too much of something, likely blood, given your flushed face, which is actually just heat exhaustion. In his mind, your body is like a pressure cooker that is overfilled. The logical solution, therefore, is to open a valve and let some of the pressure out. He reaches for a small, sharp instrument. It's a phlebotom, a lancet specifically designed for bloodletting. He suggests opening a vein in your arm, or perhaps near your ankle, to drain off the excess blood and restore harmony to your system. You stare at the knife. It is made of bronze. It has definitely not been autoclaved. It has probably been wiped on a rag that is also used to clean up spills. You instinctively clutch your arm, shaking your head vigorously. You are not letting this man near your veins with a bronze shiv. Seeing your hesitation, he offers an alternative. If you don't want to bleed, perhaps you need to purge. He gestures to a jar of dried roots. This is black hellebore. It is a powerful purgative. If you take it, your body will violently expel everything inside it, from both ends. It's basically inducing severe food poisoning on purpose to clean out the bad humors. You recall reading that hellebore is actually toxic and can cause heart failure if the dosage is slightly off. You look at the doctor's measuring spoon, which is just a rough wooden scoop. You decide you are not that lucky. It's fascinating, in a horrific way, to realize that this man isn't trying to hurt you. He genuinely believes this works. He is following the teachings of the great Hippocrates, or the followers who wrote under his name. Speaking of which, historians still argue vigorously about the authorship of the Hippocratic corpus. The famous oath and the medical texts vary so much in style and contradiction that it's likely the work of many different authors over a century, rather than one genius doctor. But whoever wrote it, they all seemed to agree that poking holes in people was a good idea. There is another option, though. If you really want to avoid the knife and the poison root, you could go to the Asclepion. This is a temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. It's a mix of a hospital, a spa, and a religious site. The treatment there is called incubation. You sleep in a sacred hall the Abaton, and hope that the god visits you in a dream to heal you or tell you what to do. This sounds lovely and sleepy, perfect for our vibe, until you learn about the sacred snakes. The temple keeps non-venomous, mostly, snakes that slither over the sleeping patients at night. Their licking of wounds is considered healing. You imagine drifting off to sleep only to feel the dry scales of a rat snake sliding across your face. You decide that, actually, maybe you're not that sick and after all. You look back at the doctor. He is now eyeing your skull. He might be considering trepanation, drilling a hole in your head. This is a very real, very ancient practice used to relieve pressure or release demons, though by the classical period, it's mostly for head trauma. Still, you don't like the way he's looking at your forehead. You need to get out of here. You force a smile and stand up straighter. I feel much better, actually, you lie. The humor has rebalanced itself. It was just a momentary flux. The doctor looks skeptical. He warns you that ignoring the imbalance could lead to melancholia, too much black bile, or mania. He tells you to avoid heavy foods, wine, and excessive thinking. He recommends a diet of barley water and oxymel, a mix of vinegar and honey. You nod enthusiastically, backing toward the door. As you escape back into the blinding street, you check your wallet. You didn't pay him, which is fine, because in this era, doctors often only get paid if the cure works or if they have a reputation to maintain. It's a competitive market. You take a deep breath of the hot, dusty air. It tastes terrible, but it's better than the metallic tang of the Iatreon. You are still thirsty, still hot, and now you are acutely aware of the blood pumping through your veins, which you are very happy to keep on the inside of your body. You realize that in the ancient world, getting sick is not just inconvenient. It is a high-stakes gamble where the treatment might kill you faster than the ailment. You decide to find some shade and maybe just sit very, very still until your humors settle down on their own. You need water, real water, not vinegar honey sludge. But finding water, and specifically safe water, is your next hurdle, and as you walk, you realize you are thirsty enough to make some bad decisions. Stepping away from the doctor's office with your blood volume intact, and your humors hopefully balancing themselves out, you try to blend back into the street traffic. You are aiming for invisibility. You've realized that in this city, standing out is dangerous. You might think of ancient Athens as the cradle of democracy, a land of equality and brotherhood. But as you navigate the crowd, you quickly learn that this equality is an incredibly exclusive club with a bouncer who hates your face. You are walking down a slightly wider avenue now, perhaps the Panathenaic Way, and you notice a distinct choreography to the pedestrians. It's not random. There is a hierarchy of walking. A man approaches you. He is older, bearded, wearing a himation that is draped with practiced elegance, no nervous clutching like you. He carries a wooden staff, not for support, but as a badge of authority. He walks right down the center of the path. He does not weave. He does not dodge. He is an icebreaker ship, and everyone else is thin ice. You instinctively step into the mud to let him pass. You have just encountered a polites, a full Athenian citizen. This is the top of the food chain. To be him, You must be male, over 18, and, crucially, born of both a citizen father and a citizen mother. This double descent law, introduced by Pericles in 451 BCE, is a mainstream historical fact that defines the entire social structure. It means the dating pool is strictly regulated and the club membership is hereditary. If you are him, you own the city. You can vote, you can own land, and you can sue people. If you are not him, you are essentially a guest in his house, and you better wipe your feet. As you scrape the mud from your sandal, you notice a group of people scurrying out of the citizen's way. They look just like you, same wool tunics, same tired expressions. These are likely medics or resident aliens. They might be rich merchants, skilled potters, or even that doctor you just fled from. They live here, pay taxes, even a special poll tax called the metoikion, and drive the economy, but they have zero political power. They can't own a house. They have to rent. They can't vote. And if they don't have a citizen sponsor or prostates, they can be sold into slavery. You realize that democracy here applies to maybe 15% of the population. For everyone else, it's just a dictatorship with better architecture. Then there are the slaves. You look around, trying to spot them. In movies, slaves are always obvious, wearing rags, chains, or marked in some way. But here, it's confusing. You see a man carrying a heavy load, but he's wearing a decent tunic. Is he a slave? Is he a poor citizen? Is he a medic? This brings us to a fascinating area of scholarly debate. An ancient text known as the Constitution of the Athenians, written by a grumpy author historians call the Old Oligarch, often identified as Pseudo-Xenophon, complains bitterly about this exact problem. He whines that in Athens, you can't tell the slaves apart from the free citizens because they dress the same and talk back just as much. He grumbles that you can't even hit a slave in the street because you might accidentally punch a poor citizen, which would be a legal nightmare. Historians argue about how much of this is accurate social commentary and how much is just an elitist rant. But for you, the confusion is real. You don't know who anyone is, which means you don't know who you have to defer to. You keep walking, head down, trying to avoid eye contact. Eye contact is tricky. If you look at a citizen woman, one of the few who might be out for a religious procession or a funeral, too long, you are inviting trouble. Respectable women are guarded commodities, but if you look at a flute girl or a hetera, a high-class courtesan, the rules are different. It's a minefield of nonverbal cues that you haven't studied for. Suddenly, you feel a hand grab your shoulder. You freeze. Your heart hammers against your ribs. Have you been identified as a foreigner? Did you walk on the wrong side of the road? You turn around. It's just a man asking if you dropped a small scroll. You shake your head, relieved, and he moves on. But the fear you felt was justified because of a specific legal concept called hubris. In modern English, hubris means excessive pride. In ancient Athenian law, hubris is a crime of assault or humiliation. If you, a nobody, shame or disrespect a citizen, even verbally, you can be prosecuted. It's not just about hurting feelings, it's about status. If you act above your station, the law can crush you. And who does the crushing? As you hurry away, You spot a man lurking near a street corner, watching a shopkeeper unload crates. He isn't a guard. He looks like a regular guy, maybe a bit nosy. This is a sycophant. Now, here is a quirky, fringe tidbit for you. The word sycophant today means a suck-up or a yes man. But in ancient Greece, it meant a fig revealer. Psychon equals fig, phainin equals to show. The origin is murky. Maybe it referred to people snitching on fig smugglers. But in practice, a sycophant is a professional accuser. Athens has no public prosecutor or district attorney. All legal cases are brought by private citizens. So, these guys make a living by wandering around, finding someone breaking a minor rule, like a medic trading without a license or someone cutting down a sacred olive tree, and threatening to sue them unless they pay a bribe. They are weaponized Karens. They are legal trolls walking the streets, looking for victims. You realize that the freedom of Athens comes with a side order of constant paranoia. Your neighbor could sue you just because he doesn't like your face, and he might win if he speaks better than you do. You shrink into your cloak, clutching your goalposts. You feel the weight of the social hierarchy pressing down on you. It's not just about wealth, it's about time, honor, and atemia, dishonor. The ultimate fear here isn't jail. Prisons are mostly temporary holding cells. It's atemia, the stripping of rights. If you are disenfranchised, you become a ghost in the machine, legally dead while still breathing. You pass a bustling workshop where potters are painting vases. You see the master yelling at an apprentice. The hierarchy is fractal. It exists on the street, in the government, and in every single shop. Everyone has someone they can kick, and everyone has someone they must bow to. It is an exhausting mental gymnastics routine to figure out your place in every new room you enter. You realize that your modern concept of individualism, the idea that you are special and matter just because you exist, is a complete joke here. You only matter if you fit into a category: citizen, father, warrior. If you are outside the categories, you are nothing. You are dust. The stress of navigating this invisible minefield is making your throat feel like sandpaper again. The fear of the sycophants, the intimidation of the citizens, and the confusion about the slaves have dried you out. You need a drink. But not water. You've learned your lesson about the tepid, ceramic-tasting water. You want wine. But drinking wine in ancient Greece is also a test, a complex ritual of chemistry and social signaling that you are almost certainly going to fail. You spot a capello, a tavern or wine shop, down a side street. It looks dark, slightly seedy, and inviting. You decide to risk it. You need to hydrate, and if you have to navigate a social minefield, you might as well do it with a slight buzz. You head toward the door, unaware that you are about to enter a debate about mixing ratios that has divided philosophers and drunkards for centuries. You duck your head and step into the capello. The transition from the blinding white glare of the street to the murky interior of the tavern renders you momentarily blind. As your eyes adjust, the smell hits you. It's a dense, fermented scent, sour grapes, damp wood, and a heavy undertone of vinegar. This isn't a high-end establishment. A capello is essentially a shop that sells retail wine, often doubling as a dive bar for the lower classes, slaves, and weary travelers like yourself. Respectable citizens usually drink at home in private symposiums, which we'll get to later, so the clientele here is a bit rough around the edges. You shuffle toward a counter, your thirst now a physical ache in your throat. Your instinct, honed by years of modern hydration habits, is to ask for a large glass of water, maybe with ice. But your survival instinct, honed by the last few hours of hygiene horrors, screams, absolutely not. Let's talk about the water situation. In ancient Greece, water is a game of Russian roulette. Unless you are right next to a pristine mountain spring, the water is likely stored in cisterns or hauled in jars that haven't been scrubbed since the Persian Wars. It's stagnant, it's lukewarm, and if you look closely at a cup of city water, you might see things swimming in it that definitely do not belong in your digestive tract. Dysentery is a very real, very common way to die here. So, the Greeks have developed a workaround. They don't drink water straight, they treat it. You approach the kapelos, the tavern keeper. He's a burly man wiping a clay cup with a rag that looks suspiciously like the one the doctor used. You ask for wine. He nods and reaches for a pitcher. Now here is where you make a rookie mistake. You expect him to pour you a glass of wine, just wine, but he doesn't. He grabs a large mixing bowl, a crater. He pours in a measure of thick, dark liquid from a large amphora. Then he turns to a water jar and pours in 3 equal measures of water. You watch in horror. He's watering down your drink. In the modern world, this is a crime against hospitality. If a bartender did this to your Cabernet, you'd send it back. But here, this is the mainstream historical fact that defines Greek drinking culture. Everyone dilutes their wine. To drink wine neat, or akritos, is considered barbaric. It is something the Scythians or the Thracians do, wild, uncultured people who don't know how to behave. The Greeks believe that drinking unmixed wine is physically dangerous. There's a persistent belief that it can cause madness, permanent brain damage, or even instant death. There's a famous story about the Spartan king Cleomenes, who supposedly went insane and killed himself because he picked up the habit of drinking unmixed wine from Scythian diplomats. So, when the tavern keeper hands you a cup that is essentially 75% water and 25% wine, he isn't ripping you off. He's trying to keep you sane. This brings us to a vigorous scholarly debate that historians and oenologists still argue about. What exactly was ancient wine? Why did it need so much water? One camp argues that ancient wine was essentially a syrup or a concentrate, that the grapes were left on the vine to raisin, or the must was boiled down to preserve it, resulting in a thick, sugary paste with a massive alcohol content, maybe 16 to 20% or higher, that physically required dilution to be drinkable. The other camp argues that the wine was chemically similar to ours, 12 to 14%, and the Greeks were just incredibly lightweights who viewed drunkenness as a shameful loss of control. Looking at the dark sludge the barman just poured, you suspect the syrup theory might have some legs. It looks viscous. He hands you the cup. It's a kylix, a wide, shallow bowl with 2 handles. It is a terrible design for a drinking vessel. It's like trying to drink soup out of a saucer while standing up. If you tilt it too fast, the wine washes over your face. You have to sip it delicately, which perhaps is the point. You take a sip. You brace yourself for the notes of oak, blackberry, or vanilla. Instead, you are hit with the taste of a pine tree. You cough, sputtering slightly. The wine tastes like you're licking a pine cone. This is the quirky tidbit of your tasting experience. The Greeks seal their terracotta amphorae with pine pitch, resin, to make them airtight. Over time, the resin leaches into the wine, giving it a strong, turpentine-like flavor. This is the ancestor of modern Retsina. But it gets weirder. To preserve the wine and balance the acidity, they sometimes add other things: seawater, marble dust, spices, or even lead, which adds a nice sweetness along with the heavy metal poisoning. So your beverage is a watered-down, pine-flavored, slightly salty cocktail that might contain lead. But, crucially, the alcohol and the acidity in the wine act as a mild antiseptic, killing off just enough of the bacteria in the water to make it safer than drinking from the puddle outside. It's not a drink for pleasure, it's a hydration survival strategy. You take another sip, getting used to the resinous tang. It's refreshing, in a medicinal sort of way. The tavern is cool and dark. You lean against the rough wooden counter, watching the other patrons. They are mostly men, talking loudly, playing dice games, or eating simple snacks like roasted chickpeas or dried figs. The atmosphere is relaxed, a stark contrast to the aggression of the street. You notice the mixing ratios changing for different customers. The tavern keeper is a mixologist of sobriety. A 3:1 water-to-wine ratio is for serious conversation. A 2:1 ratio is for a party where you want to get a bit rowdy. A 1:1 ratio is strong wine, dangerously close to the barbaric zone, and usually signals that things are about to go off the rails. You are currently on the 3.1 safety setting, which is wise given your heat exhaustion. As you drink, you realize that wine isn't just a beverage here, it's a social lubricant and a religious sacrament. Dionysus, the god of wine, is a powerful and slightly scary figure. He represents the release from the self, the madness that lurks beneath the order of the city. By mixing the wine, the Greeks are literally taming the god. They are taking the wild, dangerous power of nature, the wine, and civilizing it with culture, the water. It's a ritual in a cup. You finish your pine water, feeling the grit of the sediment at the bottom of the cup. Your thirst is quenched, and the slight buzz of the alcohol softens the edges of your headache. You feel a bit more human. The fear of the sycophants and the shame of the latrine fade slightly. But as you set the cup down, you catch a reflection of yourself in a polished bronze shield hanging on the wall. Tavern decor is eclectic here. You look soft. Your arms are untoned compared to the blacksmith drinking next to you. Your posture is slouched. In a society that worships the physical perfection of the body, kalos kagathos, the idea that a beautiful body reflects a beautiful mind, you are failing the aesthetic test. You remember the banausic workers you saw earlier, muscles rippling as they lifted stone. Then you look at the tavern keeper, who is eyeing your flabby triceps with what looks like pity. You realize that to survive here, you can't just be a brain in a jar. You need to be fit, and there is only one place to fix that. You toss a couple of small coins, obols, onto the counter. They are tiny silver things, easily lost, which is why you carry them in your mouth sometimes, a choking hazard you decide to avoid. You nod to the keeper and head back out into the sun. The wine has given you a false sense of confidence. You decide it's time to blend in by doing what every respectable Athenian man does in the afternoon. You are going to the gym. But you are forgetting one crucial detail about the Greek gymnasium. The word gymnasium comes from gymnos, and gymnos means naked. Fueled by watered-down wine and a misplaced sense of ambition, you find yourself standing before the arched entrance of the gymnasium. This isn't just a place to lift weights. It is the physical and intellectual heart of the city. It's where boys become men, where soldiers keep fit, and where philosophers like Socrates annoy people in the locker room. You step through the gateway into a large, sun-drenched courtyard surrounded by colonnades, known as the palaestra. It looks surprisingly like the inner courtyard of a very fancy resort, except everyone here is screaming, grunting, and throwing heavy objects. And as you feared, everyone is naked. This is the mainstream historical fact that never quite stops being shocking to the modern time traveler. The word gymnasium literally translates to place to be naked. In the ancient Greek mindset, there is absolutely no shame in the male body. In fact, performing athletics in clothes is considered weird, effeminate, and suspiciously barbarian. If you try to jog in your tunic, people will think you are hiding a deformity or are a Persian spy. So you have a choice. You can turn around and leave, accepting your status as a soft outsider. Or you can embrace the local culture. You take a deep breath, find a quiet corner in the apoditerion, the undressing room, and fumble with your bronze pins. You slide off your heavy wool tunic, feeling instantly cooler but infinitely more vulnerable. You fold your clothes neatly, because if someone steals your tunic while you're wrestling, you are going to have a very long, very awkward walk home. You are now standing in the palaestra, feeling the warm air on skin that hasn't seen the sun in years. You feel pale. You feel exposed. You feel like a plucked chicken in a den of wolves. But you're not ready to work out yet. There is a ritual pre-workout routine that is non-negotiable. You walk over to a large basin of olive oil. You have to oil up. This isn't just for show, it's essential gear. The oil protects your skin from the sun, dirt, and the abrasions of wrestling. It also makes you slippery, which adds a strategic element to grappling. You dip your hand into the jar. The oil is thick, golden, and smells grassy. You start to slather it on. You rub it into your arms, your chest, your legs. You are essentially basting yourself like a turkey. As you glisten in the sun, you realize that the noble sheen of the heroes in movies is actually just a layer of kitchen grease. You feel slimy. Everything you touch becomes slippery. You wonder how anyone gets a grip on anything. But wait, there's more. Once you are fully oiled, you don't just jump into the sand pit. You have to dust yourself. You walk over to a pile of fine sand or dust. You rub the dust over your oiled body. Now you are a sticky, gritty, breaded cutlet of a human being. The dust provides grip for your opponent during wrestling, because wrestling a purely oiled person is like trying to hold onto a wet bar of soap and helps regulate your body temperature. Now, fully prepped, you step into the training area. You see men throwing the discus, launching javelins, and practicing the long jump. But the long jump here is weird. They are holding heavy weights in their hands, called halteres. They swing these stone or lead weights forward as they jump to propel themselves further. It looks like a great way to dislocate your shoulders. You decide to try something simple. Wrestling, or pale, seems too intimate for your first day. Boxing, or pygmachia, looks brutal. The fighters wear leather straps on their hands that are designed to cut skin, not cushion the blow. So you wander toward the pancration area, just to watch. This is a mistake. Pancration is the MMA of the ancient world, but with fewer rules. The name means all powers. Everything is allowed except biting and eye gouging. You watch two men tangled in the dust. One has the other in a chokehold, while simultaneously twisting his ankle. The referee stands by with a stick, ready to whip them if they bite, but otherwise, he lets them go until one submits or passes out. It is visceral, violent, and terrifyingly raw. You realize that athletics here isn't a game, it is combat training. These men are preparing for war. The line between a sport and a battlefield simulation is non-existent. You back away slowly and find a less lethal activity. You spot a group of men scraping themselves with curved metal tools. This is the post-workout shower. Since soap is still not a thing, this is how you clean up. The tool is called a strigil. You watch a man press the curved bronze blade against his arm and scrape. A mixture of oil, sweat, dust, and dead skin, a substance collectively called gloios, curls off his body in gray sludge. It is oddly satisfying to watch, in a gross ASMR kind of way. Scrape, sludge, flick. It's exfoliation on an industrial scale. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit for you. This gloios, the scrapings of sweat and dirt from famous athletes, was sometimes collected and sold. People believed it had medicinal properties. You could buy a bottle of sweat of a champion to rub on your aches and pains. It's the ancient equivalent of buying the celebrities' used bathwater, but somehow worse. As you stand there, dripping oil and questioning your life choices, you notice an older man surrounded by a group of younger men in a shaded colonnade. He isn't working out, he's talking. This is the other half of the gymnasium. It's a school. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Zeno come here to recruit students. They hang out where the young men are, watching them exercise, and then engaging them in conversations about the nature of justice or the good. It's a strange dynamic. Imagine going to your local gym, and while you're trying to do squats, a guy in a robe starts asking you to define virtue. You realize that the separation between jock and nerd doesn't exist here. You are expected to be both. A healthy body creates a healthy mind. If you are smart but out of shape, you are incomplete. If you are buff but stupid, you are useless. You feel a wave of insecurity. You are neither buff nor particularly philosophical right now. You are just oily. You decide you've had enough of the body beautiful. You need to get this gunk off you. You borrow a strigil from a communal hook, germs again, let's not think about it, and start scraping. It hurts. The metal edge drags against your skin. You scrape off the oil, the dust, and the shame. Once you are relatively sludge-free, you head to the cold plunge pool to rinse off. The water is freezing. You gasp, your pores snapping shut. You climb out, shivering, and reach for your towel, which you don't have. You air dry in the sun, hopping on one foot to get your sandal back on. Dressing again is a struggle. Pulling a wool tunic over damp, slightly oily skin is a sensory nightmare. The fabric sticks and bunches. You feel like a chaotic mess. But as you walk out of the gymnasium, you notice something. You feel awake. The lethargy of the heat stroke is gone. The cold water and the terror of public nudity have shocked your system back online. You are clean-ish, exercised-ish, and you have survived the locker room of antiquity. But the sun is starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the city. The working day is winding down, but the political day is just heating up. You hear shouting from the Pnyx, the hill where the assembly meets. You realize that your day as an Athenian isn't over. You have a civic duty to perform. You have to go vote. And if you think the gym was intense, wait until you see how they handle democracy. Fresh from the gymnasium, your skin still tingling from the cold plunge and the aggressive exfoliation, you attempt to make your way home for a quiet evening. But the city has other plans for you. You notice a commotion in the agora. A line of men is moving through the market with a strange synchronized purpose. They are holding a long rope between them. You look closer. The men are Scythian archers, state-owned slaves who act as the city's police force. They look distinct in their pointed caps and patterned trousers. The rope they are holding is dripping with something wet and red. It's vermilion dye. They are sweeping across the marketplace, literally herding the citizens toward the Pnyx, the hill where the assembly meets. This is the vermilion rope trick, one of the most effective and hilarious voter turnout strategies in history. If you are a citizen and you are loitering in the market instead of doing your civic duty, the archers will try to herd you with the painted rope. If the wet red paint touches your tunic, you are marked, you will be fined, and more importantly, you will be publicly shamed as a shirker. Panic sets in. You definitely do not want to ruin your freshly pinned tunic, nor do you want to pay a fine. You join the stampede of men shuffling hurriedly toward the hill, trying to stay ahead of the wet red line. It's a forced march of democracy. You arrive at the Pnyx. It is a massive, rocky hill west of the Acropolis. This is the engine room of Athenian democracy. There are no plush seats, no air conditioning, and no electronic voting buttons. There is just a carved-out amphitheater of bedrock and a mass of humanity. You scramble up the slope and find a spot to sit. You are sitting on hard, jagged limestone. You will be sitting here for hours. Your lower back immediately begins to protest. You look around. To reach a quorum, the assembly needs 6,000 citizens. That is a staggering number of people to cram onto a hillside. The noise is deafening. It's not the polite murmuring of a modern senate. It's the roar of a football stadium. People are eating garlic and cheese, shouting at their friends, and shoving for better seats. The smell of thousands of sweating men, packed knee to knee under the afternoon sun, is a sensory experience that no history book can adequately prepare you for. Down at the bottom of the slope is the bema, a raised stone platform where the speakers stand. A herald steps up and shouts the opening formula, "Who wishes to speak?" Technically, any citizen can speak. You could go down there right now and give a speech about the price of figs or the war with Sparta. But in reality, only the rhetors, the professional politicians, and skilled orators dare to take the stage. Public speaking here is a blood sport. If the crowd doesn't like what you're saying, they won't just vote against you. They will mock you, whistle, shout you down, and possibly throw rotten fruit. It requires nerves of steel and a voice like a foghorn to be heard over the din of 6,000 hecklers. You watch as a famous demagogue takes the stand. He is waving his arms, whipping the crowd into a frenzy. He's talking about building more triremes, warships. Half the crowd cheers, the other half boos. It's chaotic. It feels less like a deliberative body and more like a mob searching for a direction. You realize that democracy here isn't about calm consensus. It's about who can shout the loudest and manipulate the emotions of the crowd most effectively. And the stakes are terrifyingly high. The assembly doesn't just pass laws, it acts as a Supreme Court and a war room. They can vote to execute generals who failed a campaign. They can vote to invade an island. They can vote to confiscate your property. And they do it all by a simple show of hands. You watch the voting process, known as keratonia, literally stretching out the hand. The herald asks for those in favor. Thousands of hands shoot up, then those against. Another forest of hands. The officials, known as the proedroi, have to estimate the count. It's an analog system prone to error and bias. Looks like about 60% for the war. They might shrug. You realize that the fate of the ancient world often hung on a rough visual estimate of armpits. But today, there is a special agenda item. The mood shifts. It becomes darker, more intense. Today is an ostracophoria. This is the vote for ostracism. Ostracism is the ultimate reality TV elimination round. Once a year, the Athenians can vote to banish one person from the city for 10 years. They don't need to be charged with a crime. They don't need a trial. They just need to be annoying or too powerful or simply disliked. If 6,000 votes are cast, the guy with the most votes has 10 days to pack his bags and get out. You are handed a ballot, but it's not paper. It's a potsherd, a broken piece of ceramic vase. This is an ostracon. You have to scratch the name of the person you want to exile onto the curved, hard surface of the pottery. You look at the shard in your hand. You don't have a stylus. You have to use a sharp rock or a nail. You look around. People are frantically scratching names. Themistocles, Simon, Hyperbolus. This brings us to a famous, slightly heartbreaking anecdote that perfectly encapsulates the pettiness of the system. The story goes that the statesman Aristides the Just was once approached by an illiterate peasant during an ostracism vote. The peasant didn't recognize Aristides and asked him to write a name on his shard for him. "Whose name do you want?" Aristides asked. Aristides, the peasant said. Surprised, Aristides asked, Why? What has this man done to you? The peasant replied, Nothing. I don't even know him. I'm just sick of hearing everyone call him the Just all the time. Aristides, being the ultimate straight arrow, wrote his own name on the shard and walked away. He was exiled shortly after. You sit there, holding your piece of garbage-turned ballot, realizing that your entire life could be upended because people are just sick of you. It's a system designed to cut down tall poppies. If you are too successful, too rich, or too smart, you are a threat to equality. You must be removed. Historians still argue vigorously about whether ostracism was a noble safety valve to prevent tyranny or a cynical tool for political rivals to knock each other out. Recent archaeology adds a twist to this debate. In a pit near the Keramakos, archaeologists found the thousands of ostraka bearing the name Themistocles. But here's the kicker. They were written in only a handful of different handwritings. This suggests that political parties were pre-writing hundreds of ballots and handing them out to illiterate voters, essentially ballot stuffing on a massive scale. So much for the will of the people. You are likely holding a rigged ballot right now. You scratch a squiggly line on your shard, pretending to vote, and toss it into the collection basket. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the wind. This isn't just a government, it's a weapon. The crowd is a beast that can be fed anyone it chooses. As the sun begins to set, turning the sky a bruised purple, the herald announces the results. A prominent politician has been voted out. The crowd cheers. You see the man in the distance, his shoulders slumped. His life as an Athenian is over. He has 10 days to say goodbye to his family, his farm, and his ancestors' graves. The assembly disperses. You stumble back down the rocky hill, your legs numb from sitting on the stone. You are exhausted, hungry, and profoundly unsettled. You realize that in Athens, you are free, but you are never safe. The collective power of the mob is always hovering over your head, like a giant invisible sword. You navigate your way out of the Pnyx, dodging the celebratory groups who are heading off to drink, and make your way toward the sanctuary of your home. You need to eat, but as you will soon discover, even dinner in ancient Greece is a high-risk activity involving mystery meats, strange etiquette, and the constant threat of poisoning, accidental or otherwise. The sun is fully set behind the mountains now, and the violet twilight, known as Lycomedes or wolf light, is settling over the city. You are walking away from the Pnyx, emotionally drained by the spectacle of mob rule. You just want to get back to the house, eat something, and sleep. But as you turn a corner near a crossroads, you accidentally pick a small pile of stones. You freeze. Your blood runs cold. You have just disturbed a herma. A herma is a simple pillar of stone with a head carved on top and, consistent with the Greek obsession we discussed at the gym, genitals carved halfway down. These aren't just lewd garden gnomes. They are sacred boundary markers dedicated to Hermes. They ward off evil and protect travelers. By kicking one or even looking at it the wrong way, you have potentially invited a curse upon yourself. This brings us to the overwhelming, suffocating reality of your mental state in ancient Greece. You are terrified of everything. To the modern mind, the world is governed by physics and biology. If you trip, it's gravity. If you sneeze, it's pollen. But here, the world is governed by invisible, petty, and extremely irritable gods. There is no such thing as random chance. Every sneeze, every stumble, every bird flying overhead is a message. You are living in a constant state of spiritual paranoia, frantically trying to decode the universe before it smites you. You quickly stoop down to fix the stones, muttering an apology. You touch the ground, then your lips, a standard gesture of obeisance. But the anxiety lingers. Did you do it right? Was that the correct apology? You continue walking, but now you are hyper-aware. You hear a sneeze from a window above. In your time, you'd say, "Bless you." Here, a sneeze is a divine omen. But is it good or bad? If the sneeze happened to your right, it's a lucky sign, a nod of approval from the gods. If it was to your left, well, you might as well go back to bed. You frantically try to remember which ear heard the sneeze more clearly. This relentless superstition dictates every microscopic detail of daily life. You don't just do things, you consult the omens first. Before a general goes to war, he checks the liver of a sacrificed sheep. Before a farmer plants seeds, he watches the flight of cranes. And you are currently worried because you saw a weasel cross your path earlier. In Athens, a weasel is a bad omen. It might mean your assembly vote was cursed. It might mean your dinner is poison. You reach the door of your house, but you don't just walk in. That would be reckless. You pause at the threshold. The threshold is a liminal space, a dangerous boundary between the safety of the indoors and the chaos of the outdoors. It is haunted by spirits. You have to step over it with your right foot first. Left is unlucky. The word sinister comes from the Latin for left, but the Greeks share the bias. You do a little hop step to ensure your right sandal hits the dirt floor first. Inside, the house is dark. Oil lamps are expensive, so they aren't lit until absolutely necessary. You fumble your way to the hearth, the Hestia. This is the sacred center of the home. You need to purify yourself after the pollution, miasma, of the marketplace and the Pnyx. Miasma is a sticky, invisible spiritual dirt that you pick up from contact with birth, death, sex, or just bad people. If you don't clean it off, the gods will ignore your prayers. You grab a bowl of water, sprinkle it with salt, and wash your hands. But is the water pure? Did a dog drink from it? You're not sure. You perform the ritual anyway, hoping it counts. Then you see it, a small black beetle scuttling near the food jar. In the modern world, you'd grab a shoe. Here, you hesitate. Is this beetle a messenger from the underworld? The Greeks have a complex relationship with insects. Cicadas are beloved. They represent immortality and music. But beetles, they are often associated with dung and decay. You decide to gently sweep it outside rather than squishing it, just in case it's a reincarnated ancestor or a pet of Persephone. This fear extends to your own body. You feel a twitch in your right eyelid. Is this a medical spasm? No. It's an omen. If the right eye jumps, you will see a friend. If the left, an enemy. Or maybe it's the other way around. You can't remember the specific superstition, so you are stuck in a limbo of anticipating either a party or a fist fight. And then there are the curses. You recall passing a graveyard earlier and seeing lead tablets nailed to the wall. These are katadesmoi, curse tablets. People write the names of their rivals on lead, fold them up, and pierce them with nails, burying them with the dead to activate the curse. May Hermes the Restrainer bind the tongue of Euthicrates in court. You realize that at any moment, someone could be burying a piece of lead with your name on it, simply because you took the last loaf of bread at the market. Your bad luck might be professionally manufactured by a neighbor. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate about rationality in Greece. We like to think of Athenians as the inventors of logic, the people who gave us philosophy and science. But historians argue that this enlightenment was a thin veneer over a deep, primal swamp of magic and superstition. Even Pericles, the great rational statesman, supposedly wore a charm around his neck when he was sick. The smartest people in the room were still afraid of the evil eye. The evil eye, or Bascania, is the fear that someone's envy can physically harm you. If you are too handsome, too rich, or too happy, you attract this negative energy. That's why you see phallic charms everywhere, on wind chimes, on jewelry, on statues. The grotesque or obscene imagery is thought to distract the evil eye, breaking its gaze and protecting you. Essentially, the ancient Greek security system is a dick pic. You sit down on a stool, exhausted by the mental gymnastics of avoiding doom. A sudden gust of wind blows through the courtyard, slamming a shutter. You jump. Was that a wind, or was it a daemon? A daemon isn't necessarily a daemon in the Christian sense. It's a spirit, sometimes good, sometimes bad, mostly just capricious. They are everywhere. They are in the springs, the trees, the shadows. Socrates claimed to have a personal daemon that warned him when he was about to make a mistake. You wish you had one of those. Instead, you just have anxiety. You decide to pour a libation to soothe whatever spirits are in the room. You take a little bit of wine, watered down, of course, and pour it onto the floor. To the good spirit, you whisper. It feels wasteful to pour perfectly good drink into the dirt, but it's an insurance policy. You are paying protection money to the invisible mafia. As you watch the wine soak into the earth floor, you realize that you are never truly alone in the ancient world. You are constantly being watched, judged, and potentially pranked by a pantheon of beings with the emotional maturity of toddlers and the power of nuclear weapons. It is exhausting. But your stomach grumbles, interrupting your spiritual crisis. The fear of gods is replaced by the very real, very human need for calories. It is time for dinner, the main meal of the day. But as you will soon find out, even eating is a minefield where social class, gender segregation, and the risk of food poisoning collide on a single plate. Having poured your libation to the spirits and swept the potential ancestor beetle out the door, you turn your attention to the most pressing matter at hand. Your empty stomach. It is time for deipnon, the evening meal. In the modern world, dinner is often a relaxation ritual, a time to unwind with comfort food. In ancient Greece, it is a daily exercise in resource management, fire safety, and digestive gambling. You enter the andron, the men's room, which doubles as the dining area. There is no dining table in the modern sense. Instead, you have low, three-legged tables that are brought in with the food and placed next to your recline. You recline on your left elbow, a posture that feels sophisticated at first, but quickly leads to a numb arm and a cramped shoulder. The concept of ergonomic dining is centuries away. The first thing that lands on your table is the staple of your existence, maza. This is a barley cake. It is not fluffy white bread. It is a dense, heavy puck made of barley flour, water, and oil. It doesn't require baking, just drying, which saves fuel. You pick it up. It's hard enough to use as a weapon. This is the cetos, the base of every meal. If you are poor, this is all you eat. If you are rich, you still eat this, but you get to put stuff on it. That stuff is called opson. Opson essentially means relish, or anything that isn't bread. It's the flavor packet of the ancient world. Tonight, your opson consists of a few wrinkly olives, a wedge of goat cheese that smells like a wet barn, and a bulb of raw garlic. You bite into the garlic. It burns. The Greeks love garlic. They believe it gives strength and courage. It also ensures that your breath could knock out of a horse, which is perhaps why personal space isn't a priority here. But tonight, you are celebrating your survival of the assembly, so you have splurged, you have acquired meat. This is where the Russian roulette begins. You unwrap a leaf containing a cut of pork you bought in the agora. You stare at it in the flickering light of the oil lamp. It looks gray. It feels slimy. There is no refrigeration in Athens. This pig was likely slaughtered this morning, or maybe yesterday, and the meat has been hanging on a hook in the 90-degree heat, buzzing with flies, dusted with street grime, and sneezed on by passers-by. You sniff it. It smells gamey. In the modern world, this smell would trigger a throw-it-out reflex. Here, it triggers a cook it until it's charcoal reflex. You have to cook this meat thoroughly to kill the legion of bacteria currently throwing a party in the muscle fibers. You light a small portable brazier, a pyrounos, right there in the room. There is no chimney. The smoke immediately fills the space, stinging your eyes. You are coughing while you cook, adding a nice smoky flavor to the meat and a layer of carcinogens to your lungs. Ventilation is a concept for the future. As the pork sizzles, masking the smell of decay with the smell of burning fat, you reach for the secret weapon of ancient cuisine, gyros. This is a mainstream historical fact that cannot be overstated. The Greeks, and later the Romans with garum, were obsessed with fermented fish sauce. It is made by taking fish guts, salt, and sun, and letting them rot in a jar for months until they turn into a liquid amber sludge. It smells like death. It tastes like pure umami salt. You drizzle this pungent liquid over your questionable pork. It serves two purposes. It adds flavor, and more importantly, it completely overpowers the taste of slightly rancid meat. It is the culinary concealer of the ancient world. While you chew on your salty, fishy, burnt pork, hoping you aren't contracting trichinosis, you ponder the ethics of your meal. This brings us to a vigorous scholarly debate regarding the ancient diet. For a long time, the standard view was that Greeks were part-time vegetarians who only ate meat during religious festivals when animals were sacrificed to the gods. Since the gods got the fat and bones burned on the altar, and the humans got the meat, a sacrifice was basically a community BBQ. However, recent analysis suggests that in a bustling metropolis like Athens, commercial meat markets were more common than we thought. You didn't have to wait for a festival. You could buy sausages and cuts from the butcher. But this commercial meat was often the leftovers of the sacrificial system, animals that had been ritually slaughtered and then sold off. So even your store-bought pork chop has a religious dimension. You are eating holy leftovers. But not everyone is on board with this. If you were a follower of Pythagoras, yes, the triangle guy, you would be looking at that pork with horror. The Pythagoreans were strict vegetarians, but not for health reasons. They believed in the transmigration of souls. That pig could be your grandma. Eating it would be cannibalism. This was a fringe, countercultural stance that made them look like weirdos to the average Athenian, who viewed meat eating as a civic duty and a privilege of citizenship. You finish the meat, feeling a heavy lump settle in your stomach. Now, your hands are greasy. You look for a napkin. There isn't one. You don't have paper towels. You don't have cloth napkins. So, you do what everyone else does. You grab a piece of bread, specifically the soft interior part, known as the apomygdalia. You wipe your greasy fingers on the dough. And then, in a move that feels incredibly wasteful to your modern sensibilities, you throw the dirty bread on the floor. This is the standard etiquette. The floor is for the dogs. You watch as a scruffy, flea-bitten hound, which has wandered in from the courtyard, snaps up the grease-soaked bread. It's a symbiotic cleaning system. The dog gets a treat. You get clean hands. The floor gets, well, the floor is still dirt, so it doesn't matter. There is, however, a quirky, fringe tidbit about this bread-wiping habit. In some severe philosophical circles, or during times of famine, eating the apomygdalia yourself was a sign of extreme poverty or asceticism. The Spartans, who prided themselves on being tough, would probably have eaten the grease bread just to prove a point. But here in Athens, you toss it. You are a civilized man, after all. You wash the meal down with another cup of watered wine. This time, the resin taste of the wine cuts through the grease of the pork. You sit back on the cline, burping loudly. Burping is fine. It shows you enjoyed the meal. But as the food settles, you realize something is missing. Sugar. You crave dessert. But there is no chocolate, no refined sugar, no ice cream. Dessert, or tragomata, consists of more fruit, maybe some dried figs, maybe some nuts. If you are really lucky, you might get a cake made of sesame seeds and honey. Honey is the only sweetener available, and it is expensive. You take a spoonful of honey and eat it straight, desperate for a glucose hit. It's cloyingly sweet and floral, but it scratches the itch. The meal is over. You have consumed a rock-hard barley puck, a bulb of raw garlic, a piece of questionable pork masked by fish gut juice, and a spoon of honey. You have wiped your hands on bread and fed it to a dog. You are full, but you feel heavy. The combination of heavy grains and grease is a lot to process. And you're not done yet. In the ancient world, dinner is just the warm-up act. The real event is the symposium, the drinking party. You have been invited to one tonight, at the house of a local poet. It sounds intellectual and highbrow. You imagine reciting verses and discussing the nature of love. But you are forgetting that symposium literally means drinking together. And when Athenian men get together to drink, things rarely stay highbrow for long. You stand up, brush the crumbs from your tunic, and prepare to navigate the most dangerous social minefield of all, a room full of drunk men with strong opinions, competitive streaks, and a lot of diluted wine. Leaving the remnants of your garlic pork dinner to the dogs, you adjust your heavy woolen cloak and head out into the night. You are not going to bed. You are going to a symposium. In the modern imagination, thanks to Plato, this word conjures images of marble halls where sober men in pristine robes politely discuss the nature of the soul. In reality, you are heading to a drinking party that sits somewhere between a university lecture and a frat house kegger, where the stakes are social survival and the main activity is competitive liver damage. You arrive at the host's house, a wealthy poet who lives near the theater of Dionysus. A slave guides you past the family quarters, which are strictly off limits, and into the andron, the men's apartment. The room is designed for one thing: communal intoxication. The floor is made of pebble mosaic, not just for beauty, but because it is waterproof and easy to scrub down in the likely event that someone misses the chamber pot later in the evening. You scan the room. There are 7 or 11 couches, clean-eye, arranged in a U-shape along the walls. This is a deliberate architectural choice. It ensures that everyone is facing everyone else. There is no head of the table. It is a circle of equality, designed to facilitate conversation and ensure that no one can pass out unnoticed. You are directed to a specific couch. In the ancient hierarchy of seating, where you sit matters. The host is on the couch to the right of the door. The guest of honor is next to him. You are placed near the corner, the cheap seats of the symposium, likely next to a boor who wants to talk about his fig trees. You recline on your left elbow. Again, your left arm is already numb from dinner, but you prop yourself up on striped cushions, trying to look relaxed. A slave approaches and places a wreath on your head. It's made of ivy or myrtle. This isn't just fashion, it's ancient pharmacology. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The Greeks believed that wearing a tight band of ivy or flowers around the head physically prevents the fumes of the wine from rising to the brain. It is a wearable anti-hangover device. You adjust your salad headgear, hoping it works, because the drinking is about to start in earnest. The first order of business is electing the symposiarch, the master of the drinking. This is usually done by a roll of the dice. The winner, or loser, depending on your perspective, becomes the dictator of the night. His word is law. He decides the mixing ratio of the wine and how many cups everyone must drink. If he says, "Tonight we drink hard," you drink hard. If you refuse, there is a simple rule: pithy e apathy, drink or depart. There is no "I'm driving" excuse here. Tonight's symposiarch, a man with a red face and a loud laugh, decrees a mixing ratio of 2.3, 2 parts wine to 3 parts water. This is an aggressive mix. It's fighting wine. He also decrees that everyone must drain their cup in one breath during certain toasts. You stare at the large kylix in your hand. It holds about half a liter. You are in trouble. The slave fills the central crater, mixes the liquid, and ladles it into your cup. You pour a small libation to the gods, spilling a bit on the floor, and sing a solemn hymn, a paean, to Apollo. It starts civilized. The men discuss recent plays, the war, and yes, a bit of philosophy. But as the second and third crater are mixed, the atmosphere shifts. The intellectual debates dissolve into the ancient equivalent of beer pong, known as kottabos. This is the mainstream historical fact of the party. Kottabos is the obsession of the Greek drinker. The goal is to take the dregs of your wine, the sediment left at the bottom of the cup. Hook your index finger through the handle of the calyx and flick the liquid across the room to hit a target. The target is usually a small disc balanced on a stand, plastics. If you hit it right, it falls with a satisfying metal clang onto a lower saucer. You watch a man across the room wind up. He shouts the name of his beloved for Liagros and flicks his wrist. A stream of wine flies through the air, completely missing the target and splashing the man next to him. The room erupts in laughter. Now it's your turn. You swirl the gritty sediment in your cup. You try to replicate the wrist motion. You flick. The wine goes nowhere near the target. Instead, it sprays all over your own tunic. You are now wet, sticky, and smell like pine resin. The symposiarch finds you. You must drink another cup without taking a breath. As the night blurs, the entertainment arrives. The door opens and a flute girl, or auletress, enters. She is playing a double pipe, aulos. The sound is shrill and nasal, cutting through the drunken chatter. She is the only woman in the room. This brings us to a vigorous scholarly debate. What exactly was her role? Was she just a musician, a high-class entertainer, or a sex worker? Historians argue about the gradations of female entertainers, from the porn, streetwalker, to the hetaira, cultured companion. The auletress occupies a murky middle ground. The men in the room certainly treat her as a commodity. They shout requests, not just for songs. It is an uncomfortable display of power dynamics. The equality of the symposium strictly applies to the men on the couches. Everyone else is scenery. The conversation is getting louder and more perilous. This is the era of paresia, free speech, but alcohol removes the filters. Arguments break out. A man throws a cup. Another recites a poem that is basically a diss track about a local politician. You realize that the wisdom of the ancients is often just drunken ranting with better vocabulary. They aren't discussing the forms of the good. They are arguing about whether Alcibiades is a traitor or a hero, and they are ready to punch each other over it. You look into your cup. Painted on the bottom of the kylix, visible only now that you've drained it, is a scene of a man vomiting while a slave holds his head. It is a visual joke, you are here map for the drinker. The Greeks are fully aware of the messiness of this ritual. They don't hide it, they paint it on their fine china. Your head is spinning. The ivy wreath has failed. The room feels hot and airless, smelling of lamp oil, unwashed bodies, and spilled wine. The symposiarch calls for another crater. This one is for health. The next one is for pleasure. The one after that, according to the poet Eubulus, is for violence, and the one after that is for the police. You are dangerously close to the violence bowl. You try to stand up to use the chamber pot, but your legs don't work. The wine-dark sea is currently washing around inside your inner ear. You stumble. A slave catches you. This is normal. In fact, being carried home by a slave is the standard exit strategy. But the night isn't over. The symposiarch announces that the party is moving. It is time for a komos. This is a drunken procession through the streets. The plan is to march to a friend's house and demand entry, or just roam around singing and waking up the neighborhood. You groan. You don't want to march. You want to pass out. But the group energy is irresistible. You are hauled to your feet, handed a torch, and shoved out the door. You stumble into the cool night air, surrounded by shouting men. You are part of a mob again, but this time a happy, chaotic one. You realize that you have survived the high-stakes etiquette of the symposium, but now you have to survive the pitch-black streets of Athens while intoxicated, holding a flaming stick with zero depth perception. You have managed to detach yourself from the komos, the rowdy conga line of drunks, pleading exhaustion or perhaps faking a sudden illness. You watch the flickering torches of your companions disappear around a corner, their body songs fading into the distance. Silence rushes back in to fill the void, and with the silence comes the dark. You are now standing alone in an Athenian street at night. And when I say dark, I don't mean the ambient, orange-tinted glow of a modern city at 2 a.m. I mean a heavy, primordial blackness that feels like a physical weight pressing against your eyes. There are no streetlights here. There are no glowing shop signs. There is no light pollution. Unless the moon is full, which luckily it is not tonight, the city is swallowed by an absolute ink-like gloom. You hold up your torch. It is a bundle of dried reeds soaked in pitch. It sputters and smokes, casting a pathetic, trembling circle of orange light that barely reaches your feet. Beyond that circle, the world ceases to exist. You are navigating a labyrinth of narrow, winding alleys that you barely recognize by day, let alone in this sensory deprivation tank. You take a tentative step forward, squish. You wince. You can't see the ground, but your foot knows what it just found. The streets, as we established, are open sewers, but at night, they are also obstacle courses. People throw their refuse out the door after dark. There might be a dead dog, a pile of broken pottery, or a sleeping beggar right in your path. You are walking with the Athenian shuffle, a sliding, hesitant gait designed to test the ground before committing your weight. You stick close to the wall, trailing your hand against the rough plaster for guidance. This is a mainstream historical fact. Ancient cities effectively shut down at night. Respectable people do not go out after dark. If you are out, you are assumed to be either a thief, a prostitute, or a drunkard. The city gatekeepers lock the main gates at sundown, and inside the walls, it is a no man's land. Suddenly, a gust of wind whips down the alley. Your torch flares violently, sparks flying, and then, foot, it goes out. You are plunged into total blindness. You freeze. The darkness is so complete it is disorienting. You lose your sense of up and down. You can hear your own heart beating loud and fast. You fumble in your tunic for a flint, but lighting a pitch torch in the wind with shaking hands is impossible. You are going to have to do this by touch. You stand perfectly still and listen. The city at night has a different soundscape. You hear the distant barking of dogs, the eternal soundtrack of Greece. You hear the wailing of a baby, and then you hear footsteps, soft, scraping footsteps, not the rhythmic march of a patrol, but the stalking pace of a predator. You press yourself flat against the wall, holding your breath. You are terrified of the Lopodites. This is a quirky, fringe tidbit that defines the specific danger of the Athenian night. Lopodites literally means clothes stealers. In a world where a good woolen cloak costs as much as a month's wages, your outfit is more valuable than your wallet. These muggers don't want your coins, which are likely in your mouth or hidden in your cheek anyway. They want your hymation. Their MO is simple. They jump you, strip you naked, and leave you shivering in the mud. The thought of walking home naked after the day you've had is a humiliation you cannot bear. The footsteps get closer. You clutch your cloak tight, preparing to defend your laundry. But the steps pause, then turn away. A cat screeches. You exhale, your knees shaking. This brings us to a scholarly debate about public safety. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of the 11, the magistrates in charge of the prisons and executions, and their force of Scythian archers in policing the streets at night. Some scholars argue that there was a rudimentary night watch, a patrol that walked the beats. Others argue that the Scythians were mostly for crowd control in the agora, and that at night you were entirely on your own. The consensus seems to be that if you screamed for help, your neighbors might come out, but they were just as likely to bolt their doors tighter. There was no 911, there was just you and the dark. You peel yourself off the wall and continue your blind grope homeward. You count the doorways by touch. 1, 2, the one with the cracked lintel. You are navigating by texture. Then you hear a creak above your head, a shutter opening on a second story. Your instinct screams at you. You dive forward, scrambling on your hands and knees. Splash. A cascade of liquid hits the street exactly where you were standing a second ago. You smell the acrid ammonia of stale urine. The chamber pot from above is a classic trope for a reason. With no indoor plumbing, the night is when the Ames gets emptied into the street. If you hadn't moved, you would have been baptized in the household waste of a stranger. You lie there in the dirt, panting, grateful to only be muddy and not soaked in sewage. You scramble up and run the last few yards, forgetting dignity, just wanting safety. You find your door You feel for the latch. It's locked. Of course it is. You pound on the wood. Open up! It's me. There is a long silence. The porter, the slave who sleeps by the door, is likely deep asleep or pretending to be. You bang again, harder, looking over your shoulder at the consuming dark. Finally, you hear the shuffle of feet, the slide of a bolt. The door creaks open. You stumble into the courtyard. The air is still and smells of home, smoke, old wool, and earth. You lean back against the heavy timber door and slide the bolt home. The clunk of the wood is the most beautiful sound you have heard all day. You are safe. You still have your cloak. You are relatively undrenched. You look up at the square of sky above the courtyard. Without the torchlight, the stars are blazing. The Milky Way is a thick, bright scar across the heavens. It is breathtaking. For a moment, the beauty of the ancient world pierces through the grime and the terror. This is the sky that inspired the myths, the maps, and the philosophy. It is pristine, but you are too tired to wax poetic. You are exhausted in a way that modern life rarely achieves. Your feet are bruised, your head is throbbing from the wine, your skin is itchy, and your nerves are frayed. You trudge toward your bedroom, the little windowless cell where this nightmare began. You don't even care about the scorpions anymore. You just want to be horizontal. You stumble back into the small, windowless room where this journey began. It has been a marathon of a day. You have survived the waking nightmare of the latrine, the sweltering heat of the woolen tunic, the crushing mob of the assembly, and the drunken peril of the dark streets. You are physically shattered. Your muscles ache from the hard ground of the pnyx. Your head throbs with a dull wine headache, and your skin feels coated in a layer of Athens, a patina of dust, oil, sweat, and smoke. You look at the Klein. In the morning, it looked like a torture rack. Now, it looks like a sanctuary. You don't even bother to take off your tunic. The thought of wrestling with the bronze pins again is too much. You just unfasten your sandals, letting them drop to the dirt floor with a soft thud. You collapse onto the mattress. The mattress sighs under your weight. It is stuffed with dried reeds, straw, or perhaps wool if the household is wealthy. It smells of dry grass and old dust. It's lumpy, uneven, and makes a rustling sound every time you move, but right now, it feels like a cloud. You close your eyes, letting the darkness of the room wash over you. You are ready to drift off. You are ready for oblivion. But the ancient world has one final challenge for you, a parting gift. It starts as a tickle, just a faint sensation on your ankle. You ignore it. It's probably a phantom sensation, a memory of the day's flies. Then you feel it on your forearm, a sharp, stinging prick, then another on your neck. Your eyes snap open in the pitch black. You are not alone in this bed. You are under siege by the Cories, bedbugs. This is the mainstream historical fact that truly ruins the romance of antiquity. The ancient world was infested. Bedbugs, Cimex lectularius, are not a modern resurgence. They are an ancient plague. They are mentioned in plays by Aristophanes, where characters complain about being eaten alive while trying to sleep. They are listed in medical texts. They are everywhere. They live in the wooden frame of your couch, in the cracks of the mud brick walls, and deep inside the reed stuffing of your mattress. And they are nocturnal. You have essentially laid yourself out on a buffet table just as the dinner bell has rung. You frantically scratch your arm. The itch is intense. You shift your position, hoping to find a bug-free zone, but there is no such thing. The colony is established. You are fighting a war you cannot see against an enemy that can go months without feeding and has been waiting specifically for you. You recall the household hints you heard about for dealing with this. The Greeks were not passive victims. They had an arsenal of bizarre and desperate remedies. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit. One popular deterrent was to hang the feet of a hare or a stag at the foot of the bed. Why? No one knows. Sympathetic magic, the smell. Another remedy involved creating a barrier of tar around the legs of the bed or balancing the bed legs in cups of water, a primitive moat to stop the crawling invaders. But looking at your bed, you see no hare's feet. You see no moat. You are defenseless. You lie there, tensed, waiting for the next bite. It is a psychological torture. Every rustle of the straw sounds like an approaching army. Historians and archaeologists still debate the extent of pest tolerance in the ancient world. Did people just get used to it? Did they develop a kind of psychological callus where they didn't notice the bites anymore? Or was every night a misery? The sheer volume of literature complaining about fleas, lice, and bugs suggests that, no, they never got used to it. They just hated it with a poetic fury. You realize that the peaceful slumber of the ancients was actually a fitful, itchy doze. You turn over, wrapping your heavy cloak around you like armor, hoping the wool is too thick for their proboscises to penetrate. You tuck your hands in. You bury your face. But as the exhaustion finally overtakes the itch, a strange sense of perspective settles in. You have made it. You navigated a world without safety nets, without germ theory, without electricity, and without comfort. You walked the razor's edge of social hierarchy and superstitious terror. You saw the beauty of the stars and the ugliness of the gutter. The scratching sound in the wall, the scorpion or the gecko, returns. But you are too tired to care. The bedbugs bite, but you are too heavy to move. The sounds of the city have died down to a low, rhythmic hum. The day is done. You let go. You sink into the lumpy mattress, surrendering to the dusty, itchy, beautiful, terrible reality of the past. But you don't have to stay there. Take a deep breath. Inhale slowly, filling your lungs not with the dusty, smoky air of a mud brick room, but with cool, clean, filtered air. Hold it for a moment. Now, exhale. Let it all go. Feel the heavy wool tunic dissolve from your skin. Feel the scratchy, lumpy straw mattress beneath you soften and smooth out, transforming into your own bed. Feel the support of your pillows, the softness of your sheets, the perfect temperature of your room. You are not in Athens anymore. You are safe. There are no scorpions in the corner. There are no bedbugs waiting in the dark. There is no one judging your vote, no one watching your step, no one demanding you drink watered-down wine. The noise of the agora has faded into a distant echo, replaced by the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The sun is set on that ancient world. The fires are out. The city is sleeping under the dust of centuries. You have walked its streets, and now you have returned. You are here, in the present, in the quiet comfort of your own space. Let your shoulders drop, unclench your jaw, let the tension of the day, your day, and the ancient day melt away into the mattress. You are warm, you are clean, you are at rest. The darkness around you isn't heavy or threatening. It is a soft velvet blanket wrapped around you to keep you safe. Drift now. Let the history fade into a dream. Let the story end. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to solve. Just the quiet, just the sleep.